The pistol shot that echoed through Hangtown, California, that scorching August morning in 1873 was not meant to kill anyone, but it changed everything nonetheless. Ophelia Owens heard the sound from inside the whitewashed church, where she was arranging wildflowers on the altar. Her father's sermon notes spread across the front pew, awaiting his review. At 22 years old, she had heard plenty of gunshots in this gold rush town that refused to die even after the easy pickings had long since vanished from the surrounding hills. Most shots meant another drunken argument outside one of the saloons, another score being settled, another reason for her father to shake his head and preach about the wickedness that plagued their community. But something about this particular shot made her drop the bouquet of Indian paintbrush and rush to the door. Outside, the midday sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty Main Street. A crowd was gathering near the livery stable, and Ophelia could hear angry voices rising above the general murmur. She lifted her skirts just enough to keep them from dragging in the dirt and hurried toward the commotion, her dark brown hair already beginning to escape its pins in the dry heat. "He is a thief, plain and simple." That was Mort Higgins, the livery owner, his face red and sweating as he waved his pistol in the air. "Caught him red-handed trying to take a horse that was not his." "I already told you," came another voice, steady and calm despite the circumstances. "I was not stealing anything. I paid for boarding 3 days ago, and that is my horse." Ophelia pushed through the growing crowd until she could see the man speaking. He stood with his hands raised, not in surrender but in a gesture of reason, his hat pushed back on his head revealing sun-bleached brown hair and eyes the color of winter sky. Dust covered his clothes, and he wore the look of someone who had traveled far and hard. A wanderer, clearly, but there was something in his bearing that suggested he was more than just another drifter passing through on his way to somewhere else. "Your horse," Mort sputtered. "I have never seen you before in my life." "That is because you were not here when I arrived," the stranger said patiently. "I dealt with your son, paid him $2 for 3 days of boarding and feed. Today is the 3rd day." "My son," Mort's eyes narrowed. "Tommy," the stranger nodded. "Skinny kid, about 16, missing his front tooth on the left side." Several people in the crowd exchanged glances. Everyone knew Tommy Higgins, and everyone knew he was not the most reliable young man in Hangtown. Mort's expression shifted from righteous anger to something more uncertain. "Even if that is true," Mort blustered, "Tommy had no right to take money without telling me. Far as I am concerned, that makes you in possession of stolen boarding." "Your family disputes are not my concern," the stranger said, his patience beginning to show the first signs of fraying. "I paid for a service and I am collecting what I paid for. Now I would appreciate it if you would lower that pistol before someone gets hurt." "Pa, he is telling the truth," a young voice piped up from the back of the livery. Tommy Higgins emerged, looking sheepish and scared. "I took the money and meant to tell you, but I spent it on, well, it does not matter what I spent it on. But he did pay fair and square." Mort's face went from red to purple. He rounded on his son, and Ophelia could see the situation spiraling toward a family argument that would likely involve more shouting and possibly more gunfire. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "Mr. Higgins," she said clearly, her voice cutting through the noise. "Perhaps we can resolve this peacefully. My father always says that misunderstandings are the devil's favorite tool for sowing discord." Mort turned to look at her, as did most of the crowd. Being the preacher's daughter in a town like Hangtown meant people listened when you spoke, even if they did not always heed what you said. The stranger's blue eyes found hers as well, and she felt an unexpected jolt of something she could not quite name when their gazes met. Miss Owens, Mort said, lowering his pistol slightly. With respect, this is a business matter. Of course it is, Ophelia agreed. A business matter built on a misunderstanding. This gentleman paid your son for services rendered. Your son failed to communicate that to you. The gentleman is not at fault. Surely you can see that. She could see Mort wrestling with his pride. He had made a public accusation, and backing down would sting. But Mort Higgins, for all his bluster, was not a truly unreasonable man. "Fine," he finally muttered. "Take your damn horse." "But Tommy, you and I are going to have words." The crowd began to disperse, disappointed that there would be no further excitement. The stranger lowered his hands and tipped his hat to Ophelia. "Thank you, miss," he said, "though I suspect I would have sorted it out eventually." "Perhaps," Ophelia said, "but possibly after spending a night in our jail, which I assure you is not comfortable in this heat." Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the weathered quality of his skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. He was perhaps 25 or 26, she guessed, young enough to still have that lean ranginess of youth, but old enough to have clearly seen some of the world. "Cole Fairfield," he said, extending his hand, "and you have my genuine gratitude." "Ophelia Owens," she replied, taking his hand. His grip was firm, calloused, warm. She released it perhaps a moment sooner than she might have otherwise, aware of eyes still watching from windows and doorways. "My father is the preacher here." "Ah," Cole said, and something flickered in his expression. "That explains the biblical wisdom. Your father is a fortunate man to have such a quick-thinking daughter." "I merely spoke common sense," Ophelia said, but she felt her cheeks warming in a way that had nothing to do with the August heat. "Will you be staying in Hangtown, Mr. Fairfield?" "Cole, please," he said. "And I had not planned on it. I am heading north toward Sacramento, or I was until this delay. Now it is past noon, and I would rather not ride through the worst of this heat." "The hotel on Main Street is clean and reasonable," Ophelia heard herself saying. "And if you are hungry, the restaurant next door serves an adequate meal." "I appreciate the recommendation," Cole said. He was looking at her in a way that made her feel simultaneously visible and transparent, as if he could see past the preacher's daughter exterior to something underneath that even she was not entirely sure existed. "Perhaps I will take advantage of a real bed for one night." Ophelia knew she should excuse herself, return to her flower arranging and her father's sermon notes. Instead, she found herself saying, "The church service is tomorrow morning if you are still here. My father is a good speaker, even to skeptics." Cole smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his serious face into something younger and more open. "And what makes you think I am a skeptic? Most wandering men are," Ophelia said. "In my experience." "You might be right," Cole acknowledged, "but I have been wrong before. Perhaps your father will surprise me." He tipped his hat again and turned toward the livery to retrieve his horse, leaving Ophelia standing in the dusty street feeling oddly flustered and alive in a way she had not felt in longer than she could remember. The rest of that day passed in a blur of ordinary tasks that felt anything but ordinary. Ophelia finished arranging the flowers, reviewed her father's sermon notes, helped prepare dinner in the modest house behind the church that served as the parsonage. Her father, Reverend Samuel Owens, was a tall, spare man with graying hair and gentle eyes that had seen more than their share of human suffering. He had brought his family to California in 1865, drawn by reports that the gold rush towns needed spiritual guidance as much as they needed anything. Ophelia's mother had died of fever 2 years after their arrival, leaving Samuel to raise his daughter alone. "You are quiet tonight," her father observed as they sat down to their simple meal of beans, bread, and salt pork. Is something troubling you? No, Papa, Ophelia said, and it was not entirely a lie. Troubled was not the word for what she felt. There was some excitement this morning. Mort Higgins nearly arrested a man for horse theft. Her father sighed. Mort is quick to anger. What happened? Ophelia related the story, carefully keeping her description of Cole Fairfield factual and brief. But her father knew her too well. And this wandering cowboy, he seemed like a decent man, Samuel asked, his eyes twinkling slightly. He seemed honest, Ophelia said carefully. He remained calm when others would have lost their temper. A valuable quality, her father agreed. Though I wonder what brings another wanderer to our town. We seem to attract them, do we not? Men searching for something they cannot name. Perhaps they are searching for God, Ophelia suggested, echoing the kind of thing her father might say. Perhaps, Samuel said. Or perhaps they are simply searching for a place to rest. Both are valid needs, I think. That night, lying in her narrow bed with the window open to catch any hint of a cooling breeze, Ophelia found sleep elusive. She kept seeing Cole Fairfield's blue eyes, kept hearing the steady calm in his voice as he faced down an angry man with a gun. There had been wanderers through Hangtown before, dozens of them over the years. Some had been rogues, some had been broken men, some had been seekers after fortune or escape. But none of them had made her feel the way she had felt when Cole had looked at her in that dusty street. It frightened her a little, that feeling. Her life in Hangtown was predictable, circumscribed by her duties as the preacher's daughter. She taught Sunday school to the handful of children whose parents bothered to send them. She visited the sick, brought food to families struggling to make ends meet, organized the church socials that provided respectable entertainment in a town where entertainment usually meant drinking and gambling. She was respected, even liked. But she had never felt particularly alive, never felt like there was anything beyond the daily round of small kindnesses and expected behaviors. Until this morning, when a stranger with dusty clothes and winter sky eyes had looked at her like she was someone worth seeing. Sunday morning dawned cooler than Saturday had been, with high clouds that promised no rain but at least filtered the worst of the sun's glare. Ophelia dressed carefully in her Sunday best, a dark blue dress with a white collar that her mother had made years ago. She pinned her hair up more securely than usual, then felt foolish for the extra effort. If Cole Fairfield came to the service, it would not be to look at her. If he came at all, which he probably would not. But when she entered the church at 15 minutes before the service was to start, he was already there, sitting in the back pew, hat in his hands. He had cleaned up, she noticed. His shirt was fresh, his face shaved, his hair combed back and still slightly damp. He looked up when she entered and his face brightened in recognition. "Miss Owens," he said, standing, "I took your recommendation." "So I see," Ophelia said, pleased beyond all reasonable measure that he had come. "I hope you will find it worthwhile." "I am sure I will," Cole said, and the way he said it made her wonder if he was talking about the sermon at all. More people began filing in, greeting Ophelia as they passed, casting curious glances at the stranger in the back pew. Hangtown's church was never full, but they usually got a respectable showing on Sunday mornings, maybe 40 or 50 souls out of the town's population of 300. Some came out of genuine faith, some out of habit, some because it was the socially expected thing to do. Her father's sermon that morning was about mercy and second chances, drawn from the story of the prodigal son. Samuel Owens was indeed a fine speaker, his voice strong but not hectoring, his manner sincere without being cloying. He spoke about how easy it was to judge others, to see them only as their worst mistakes, to forget that everyone was capable of change and redemption. Ophelia had heard her father preach hundreds of sermons over the years, but today she found herself listening with fresh ears, wondering what Cole was making of it. She resisted the urge to turn around and look at him, keeping her eyes forward, her hands folded in her lap. After the service ended, her father stood at the door shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with the departing congregation. Ophelia usually stood beside him, but today she found herself drifting toward the back of the church where Cole still sat, apparently in no hurry to leave. "Well," she asked, "what did you think?" Cole looked up at her and his expression was thoughtful. "Your father is a man who believes what he preaches," he said. "That is rarer than you might think." "I know it is rare," Ophelia said. "I have met plenty of preachers who were more interested in their own importance than in helping others." "But not your father," Cole said. It was not quite a question. "No," Ophelia agreed. "Not my father. He truly cares about people. Sometimes I think he cares too much, that it wears him down." "And you?" Cole asked. "Do you care too much?" It was a surprisingly direct question, and Ophelia found herself giving an equally direct answer. "I care about doing what is right. I care about being useful. But sometimes I wonder if that is enough." "Enough for what?" Ophelia hesitated. She barely knew this man, and yet she felt like she could speak honestly to him in a way she rarely could with the people she had known her entire time in Hangtown. Enough to make life feel like more than just a series of obligations fulfilled. Cole nodded slowly. "I understand that feeling," he said. "I have spent the last 5 years wandering, taking work where I can find it, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. I told myself it was freedom, but lately I have been wondering if it is just another kind of cage." "What made you start wandering?" Ophelia asked. A shadow crossed Cole's face. "The war," he said simply. "I came home and found that home did not fit anymore, or I did not fit it. So I left and I kept leaving, and here I am." Ophelia knew about the war, of course. It had ended 8 years ago, but its echoes still reverberated through the country, through families and individuals. Many men had come west afterward, seeking fresh starts or escape or just distance from memories too painful to live with daily. "And now," she asked, "are you still leaving?" "I do not know," Cole said honestly. "I have been heading toward Sacramento because I heard they might be hiring men to work on expanding the railroad yards. It is just another job in another town. But sitting in this church this morning, listening to your father talk about second chances, I found myself thinking that maybe there is more to life than just the next job in the next town." "There is," Ophelia said with conviction. "There has to be." They were interrupted by her father's approach. Samuel Owens extended his hand to Cole with a warm smile. "I do not believe we have met," he said. "Samuel Owens." "Cole Fairfield, sir," Cole said, standing and shaking the offered hand. "Your daughter recommended I attend your service, and I am glad I did. It was a fine sermon." "Ophelia has always been my best advocate," Samuel said, his eyes crinkling with affection as he glanced at his daughter. "Will you be staying in Hangtown, Mr. Fairfield?" "I had planned to move on this morning," Cole said, "but I find myself reconsidering. Is there much work to be had here?" "That depends on your skills," Samuel said. "The mines are mostly played out, but there are ranches in the area that often need hands. And the town itself always needs carpenters, blacksmiths, general laborers. What is your trade?" "Whatever needs doing," Cole said with a self-deprecating smile. "I have worked cattle, built fences, driven wagons, even done some blacksmithing when required. I am not a master at anything, but I am competent at most things." "A jack of all trades," Samuel said approvingly. "That is often more useful than specialized skill, particularly in a town like this. If you are serious about possibly staying, I could introduce you to a few people." The Anderson Ranch, about 5 miles north of town, was just mentioning last week that they needed another hand for the fall roundup. "I would appreciate that, Reverend," Cole said. "Very much." "Come by for Sunday dinner," Samuel said impulsively. "It is nothing fancy. Just pot roast and vegetables, but we have plenty and you look like you could use a home-cooked meal." Ophelia felt her heart skip. Her father was a generous man, but it was not often he invited strangers to their home. He must have seen something in Cole that he approved of, some quality beyond the surface that spoke to his preacher's instinct for character. "I would not want to impose," Cole said, but his eyes flicked to Ophelia with a question in them. "It is no imposition," Ophelia said quickly. "Truly. We would enjoy the company." And so it was settled. Cole returned to the hotel to collect his things and settle his bill, then met them at the parsonage an hour later. The house was small but comfortable, with a kitchen that opened onto a garden where Ophelia grew vegetables and herbs. She had put the pot roast on early that morning, and now the smell of cooking meat and onions filled the small dining room. Over dinner, Cole told them more about himself, though Ophelia sensed he was still holding back some things, parts of his story he was not ready to share. He had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 4 brothers. His family had owned a small farm, and he had expected to farm all his life until the war came. He had fought for the Union, seen action in 3 major battles, and lost 2 of his brothers along the way. When he came home in 1865, his parents were dead and the farm was barely functioning. His remaining brother wanted to stay and rebuild, but Cole found he could not. "Everything reminded me of what we had lost," he said quietly. "Every field, every room in the house." Tom, my brother, he was able to look forward to imagine the future, but all I could see was the past. So I told him to buy out my share for whatever he could afford, and I headed west. "And you have been moving ever since," Samuel said. Cole nodded. "Some places I stayed a few months, some just a few weeks. I sent money to Tom when I could, helped him keep the farm going. Last I heard, he got married and has a daughter now. They are doing well." "But you have not gone back to visit," Ophelia said. "No," Cole admitted. "I kept thinking I would, once I felt like I had found what I was looking for. But I never could quite name what that was, so I never quite found it, and the years just kept passing." "Sometimes what we are looking for is not a place," Samuel said gently. "Sometimes it is a state of mind, a sense of peace with ourselves and the world." "Maybe so," Cole said. "Your sermon this morning about second chances, it made me think. Maybe I have been running away instead of moving forward. Maybe it is time to stop running." "Hangtown might seem like an odd place to stop," Ophelia said. "It is not much of a town." "It has a church," Cole said, looking at her, "and a preacher who believes what he preaches, and people who care about doing what is right. That is more than a lot of places can claim." After dinner, Cole thanked them profusely and took his leave, promising to follow up on Samuel's offer to introduce him at the Anderson Ranch. After he left, Ophelia cleared the dishes while her father sat at the table, smoking his pipe and looking thoughtful. "He is a good man," Samuel finally said. "Troubled but good, I can usually tell." "Yes," Ophelia agreed, scrubbing a plate with more vigor than necessary. "Ophelia," her father said gently, "I saw how you looked at him, and how he looked at you." She stopped scrubbing, her hands still in the wash water. "Papa, I barely know him." "That is true," Samuel acknowledged, "and I am not suggesting anything improper. But you are 22 years old, my dear. It would be perfectly natural for you to feel drawn to a decent man near your own age. Lord knows there are few enough of them in this town." Ophelia dried her hands and sat down across from her father. "I do feel drawn to him," she admitted. "But he is a wanderer, Papa. Even if he stays for a little while, he will leave eventually. They always do." "Perhaps," Samuel said. Or perhaps he is a man who has been wandering because he had not yet found a reason to stay anywhere. I have seen it before, you know. Men who drift until something or someone gives them an anchor. You make it sound like I could be that anchor, Ophelia said. That is a lot of weight to put on something that might just be mutual attraction. I am not putting weight on anything, her father said. I am simply saying that you should not close your heart to possibilities out of fear. You have spent so much of your life taking care of others, being the dutiful daughter, the helpful preacher's girl. It would not be wrong for you to want something for yourself. Ophelia felt tears prick at her eyes. She loved her father deeply, but they rarely spoke so openly about her own needs and desires. What if I want something and cannot have it? She asked. What if that is worse than not wanting anything at all? Oh, my dear girl, Samuel said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Not wanting anything at all is not living. It is just existing, and you deserve more than that. Cole did indeed follow up on the introduction to the Anderson ranch. By Monday afternoon, he had hired on as a ranch hand for $50 a month plus board. The work was hard but familiar, involving long days in the saddle checking fence lines, moving cattle, and preparing for the fall roundup when they would drive the herd to market. He took a room in the bunkhouse with the other hands, a mixed group of men ranging from kids barely out of their teens to weathered veterans of the range. But Cole found himself riding into Hangtown every few days, ostensibly for supplies or a hot bath at the barber shop or a decent meal at the restaurant. In truth, he came hoping to catch a glimpse of Ophelia. Sometimes he would see her walking to visit a sick parishioner, her arms full of a basket of food or medicine. Sometimes he would see her in her garden behind the parsonage, her skirts kilted up and dirt on her hands as she tended her vegetables. Once he saw her teaching the Sunday school children in the shade of the oak tree behind the church, her face animated as she told them some story from the Bible. He always tipped his hat to her, and she always smiled back, but for the first 2 weeks he did not have a real conversation with her beyond simple greetings. He was aware that he was dancing around something, approaching it sideways like a skittish horse. Part of him wanted to ride straight up to her and ask if he could call on her properly, court her like a man with honorable intentions. But another part of him held back, wondering what right he had to bring his troubled past and uncertain future into her orderly life. It was a chance encounter at the general store that finally broke the pattern. Cole had ridden in on a Saturday afternoon to pick up tobacco for one of the older ranch hands. He was browsing the shelves when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Mr. Fairfield, I thought that was your horse outside." He turned to find Ophelia standing there with a shopping basket over her arm, wearing a simple green dress that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. Her hair was coming loose from its pins as usual, and she had a smudge of flour on her cheek that made her look endearingly human rather than like the perfect preacher's daughter. "Miss Owens," he said, his heart inexplicably speeding up, "you have flour on your face." She reached up and scrubbed at the wrong cheek. "Did I get it?" "Other side," he said. Without thinking, he reached out and gently brushed the smudge away with his thumb. The moment his skin touched hers, he realized how familiar the gesture was, how inappropriate, and started to pull back. But she did not flinch away. Instead, she went very still, her eyes locked on his. "Thank you," she said softly. "I apologize," Cole said. "That was too familiar of me." "It was kind," Ophelia corrected. "There is a difference." She paused, then added, "How are you finding the work at the Anderson ranch?" "Good," Cole said. "Hard but honest. Mr. Anderson is a fair man and the other hands are decent enough." "I am glad," Ophelia said. "I was not sure you would really stay. Most wanderers do not." I am trying not to be most wanderers, Cole said. I meant what I said at your father's table. Maybe it is time to stop running. And is it? Ophelia asked. Are you finding what you were looking for? Cole looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in the set of her shoulders, the generous curve of her mouth. I am starting to, he said honestly, though I am not sure I deserve it. Deserve what? Ophelia asked. Peace, Cole said. A second chance. All the things your father preached about. Everyone deserves those things, Ophelia said firmly. The war was not your fault, Cole. None of it was. You cannot keep punishing yourself for surviving. He was startled by her directness, by how clearly she had seen through to the heart of what troubled him. How did you know? I see it in your eyes sometimes, Ophelia said gently. A kind of guilt, like you are not sure you have the right to be happy. My father has counseled men with that same look. It is common among those who fought, he says. Survivor's guilt, he calls it. Your father is a wise man, Cole said. He is, Ophelia agreed. But I did not learn about guilt from him. I learned about it from feeling it myself. My mother died because she insisted on going with me to visit a sick family on the other side of town. It was late in the day, and we stayed too long. On the way home, it started to rain, and we both got soaked. I was fine, but she caught fever and died within a week. I was 18 years old, and I felt like I had killed her. That was not your fault, Cole said immediately. I know that now, Ophelia said. It took me a long time to understand it, but I know it. My father helped me see that we cannot control everything, that sometimes terrible things happen despite our best efforts, and that carrying guilt for circumstances beyond our control only dishonors the memory of those we lost. They would want us to live, Cole, to really live, not just exist. Cole felt something shift inside his chest, some tight knot of old pain loosening just slightly. You are wise beyond your years, Miss Owens. I am not that young, Ophelia said with a slight smile, and you can call me Ophelia. We have shared Sunday dinner, after all. Then you must call me Cole, he said, returning her smile. No more Mr. Fairfield. They stood there in the general store, grinning at each other like fools until the shopkeeper cleared his throat meaningfully. Ophelia blushed and remembered her basket, and Cole remembered the tobacco he was supposed to be buying. They completed their purchases and walked out into the afternoon sunshine together. I suppose you need to get back to the ranch, Ophelia said, sounding disappointed. Eventually, Cole said. But I have an hour or two. Would you like some company on your walk home? I would like that very much, Ophelia said. They walked slowly through the town, matching their steps, talking about everything and nothing. Cole told her about his work on the ranch, about the ornery steer that kept breaking through fences, and the new colt that showed promise as a cutting horse. Ophelia told him about the church social they were planning for the fall, about the miner's widow she was helping learn to read, about her hopes to start a proper school in Hangtown if they could ever scrape together the funds for a teacher. You could teach, Cole said. You are good with children. I have watched you with the Sunday school class. Ophelia felt her cheeks warm. You have watched me. I have, Cole admitted. I hope that does not make me sound like some kind of lurker. I just find myself drawn to the church whenever I am in town. It is peaceful there. And here I thought you might be coming to town hoping to see me, Ophelia said, surprising herself with her boldness. Cole stopped walking and turned to face her. I was, he said simply. I am. Ophelia, I know we have not known each other long, but I need to be honest with you. You have been in my thoughts constantly since the day we met. When I am out on the range, when I am eating supper in the bunkhouse, when I am lying in my bed at night, I think about you. About your laugh, your kindness, the way you see right through people's defenses to who they really are. Ophelia's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "I think about you too," she confessed. "I try not to because I am afraid of being hurt when you leave, but I cannot seem to help it." "What if I told you I am not planning to leave?" Cole said. "What if I told you that for the first time in 5 years, I am thinking about staying somewhere, building something permanent?" "I would say that I want to believe you," Ophelia said, "but wanting something and having it are different things." "Then let me prove it to you," Cole said. He took her hand, right there on the street where anyone could see. "Let me court you properly. Let me show you that I am serious about staying, about building a life here. I cannot promise that I will never have hard days, that I will never struggle with my past. But I can promise that I will try every day to be the kind of man who deserves a woman like you." Ophelia looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. She saw hope there, and fear, and a deep sincerity that made her chest ache. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you can court me. But Cole, I need you to understand something. I will not be a reason for you to stay if staying makes you miserable. I will not be your anchor if being anchored drowns you." "Do you understand?" "I understand," Cole said, "but you have it backwards. You are not the anchor. You are the reason the anchor matters. You make me want to stay, not out of obligation but out of desire, out of hope that maybe I can have a real life again, a life that is about more than just running away." They were still standing there, hands clasped, gazes locked, when they heard a pointed cough nearby. Ophelia looked over to see Mrs. Patterson, one of the church's most devoted gossips, watching them with unconcealed interest from across the street. "We should probably be more discreet," Ophelia said reluctantly, releasing his hand. "Probably," Cole agreed, "but I do not really care who knows that I am courting you." "My reputation does have to be considered," Ophelia said. "I am the preacher's daughter after all." "Of course," Cole said quickly. "I did not mean to be disrespectful. I will speak to your father, ask his permission properly." "He will give it," Ophelia said. "He already told me he approves of you." Cole's face lit up. He did," Ophelia confirmed. "The night you came to dinner. He said you were a good man, and he was glad I had found someone I could care about." "He knew before I even asked," Cole said. "Before you even agreed." "My father is observant," Ophelia said with a smile. "And apparently we are not as subtle as we think we are." They continued walking toward the parsonage, keeping a respectable distance now but still very aware of each other. When they reached the gate, Cole stopped and took off his hat. "May I call on you tomorrow?" he asked formally. "After church, perhaps. We could take a walk or sit in your garden, whatever would be proper." "I would like that," Ophelia said. "Very much." Cole mounted his horse and rode back toward the Anderson ranch, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Behind him, Ophelia stood in the garden and watched him go, a smile on her face that she could not have suppressed if she tried. The courtship that followed was proper but passionate, bounded by the social expectations of a small town, but charged with an electricity that neither of them tried to deny. Cole came to town every Sunday after church, and he and Ophelia would spend the afternoon together, sometimes walking through the hills outside town, sometimes sitting on the porch of the parsonage while her father read in his study within easy earshot. They talked endlessly, discovering each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Cole told her about his childhood on the farm in Missouri, about fishing in the creek with his brothers, about the crushing weight of his father's expectations and his own desire to prove himself. He told her about the war, haltingly at first but with growing ease as he realized she would not judge him for the things he had seen and done. He told her about the nightmares that still sometimes woke him, about the guilt he felt for being whole when so many others had died or come home broken. Ophelia told him about growing up in a series of small towns as her father moved from parish to parish, always feeling like an outsider, always having to be on her best behavior because her father's reputation depended on her conduct. She told him about her mother, about the vibrant, loving woman who had made their small life feel rich and full, and about the hollow ache that had followed her death. She told him about the loneliness of being the preacher's daughter, admired but never really known, always expected to be strong for others but rarely allowed to be weak herself. "You can be weak with me," Cole told her one afternoon as they sat beside the creek north of town, their shoes off and their feet in the cool water. "You do not have to be strong all the time." "That is a relief," Ophelia said, "because honestly I am terrified." "Of what?" Cole asked, though he thought he knew. "Of this," Ophelia said, gesturing between them. "Of how much I already care about you. We have only been courting for a month, Cole, but when I think about you leaving, it feels like my heart might break. That frightens me." "It frightens me too," Cole admitted. "I spent 5 years keeping everyone at arm's length, never letting myself care too much about any place or any person. It felt safer that way. But with you, I cannot seem to keep my distance. I do not want to, and that is both wonderful and terrifying." "Promise me something," Ophelia said, turning to face him. "Promise me that if you ever do want to leave, if staying here starts to feel like a cage again, you will tell me. You will not just disappear one day to spare my feelings." "I would rather have my heart broken honestly than live with uncertainty." "I promise," Cole said solemnly. "But Ophelia, I need to tell you something. I am not going to leave. I know it has only been a month and maybe it is too soon to say this, but I am in love with you. Completely, irrevocably in love with you. You brought light to my life when I did not even realize I was living in darkness. You make me want to be better, to do better, to build something that lasts. So I am not going anywhere unless you send me away." Ophelia felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stood in that street with your hands raised, refusing to lose your temper even when you had every right to. You were so steady, so sure of yourself. And then you looked at me and I felt like you really saw me, not just the preacher's daughter but me. The real me underneath." Cole reached out and cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "The real you is extraordinary," he said. "And if you will have me, I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how extraordinary you are." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Ophelia said, her voice trembling. "Not yet," Cole said. "Not officially. I want to do this right, Ophelia. I want to talk to your father, make sure I can provide for you properly, maybe even write to my brother so he knows I have finally found a reason to put down roots. But yes, I am going to ask you to marry me, very soon. If you think you might say yes." "I will say yes," Ophelia said. "When you ask properly, formally, I will say yes. I am saying it now so you know, so there is no doubt." Cole pulled her close then, mindful of propriety but unable to resist the need to hold her. She came into his arms like she belonged there, fitting against him perfectly. They stayed like that for a long time, beside the creek in the afternoon sun, holding each other and listening to the water flow past. Cole did everything he said he would. He spoke to Samuel Owens formally, asking permission to marry Ophelia. Samuel gave his blessing gladly, saying he could not imagine a better man for his daughter. Cole wrote to his brother Tom, a letter that took him 3 drafts to get right, explaining that he had finally found what he had been searching for and asking for Tom's blessing as well. Tom's response came 3 weeks later, enthusiastic and happy, saying he had worried about Cole for years and was relieved to know his brother had found peace at last. Cole also went to the bank and opened an account, depositing the money he had saved from his years of wandering. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to think about buying some land, maybe building a house. He and Ophelia talked about the future in concrete terms now, planning where they might live, what kind of life they wanted to build together. 2 months after their conversation by the creek, on a Sunday afternoon in late October with the leaves turning gold on the hillsides, Cole took Ophelia walking to a spot they had discovered together, a clearing with a view of the whole valley spread out below. The air was crisp and clear, and Ophelia's cheeks were pink from the walk and the cool breeze. Cole had been nervous all day, the ring he had bought from the jeweler in Sacramento burning a hole in his pocket. He had practiced what he wanted to say a dozen times, but now that the moment was here, all his rehearsed words fled his mind. "Ophelia," he began, then stopped, shook his head and laughed at himself. "I had a whole speech prepared, but I seem to have forgotten it." "You do not need a speech," Ophelia said gently. "Just speak from your heart." "My heart says that you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Cole said simply. "My heart says that I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. My heart says that I want to build a home with you, raise children with you, grow old with you. My heart says that I love you more than I have ever loved anything or anyone, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." He dropped to one knee, pulling the ring from his pocket. It was simple, just a gold band with a small diamond, but he had chosen it carefully, thinking of her practical nature and her lack of vanity. "Ophelia Owens, will you marry me?" he asked. "Will you let me spend my life loving you?" Ophelia did not even pretend to think about it. "Yes," she said immediately, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, of course, yes." Cole slipped the ring onto her finger, and then she was pulling him to his feet and into her arms, and they were both laughing and crying at the same time. He kissed her then, their first real kiss, and it was everything he had imagined and more. Her lips were soft and warm, and she kissed him back with a fervor that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ophelia looked up at him with shining eyes. "You brought light to my life," she whispered. "When I met you, I was going through the motions, doing what was expected but not really living. You woke something up in me, something I did not even know was sleeping. You made me feel alive." "You did the same for me," Cole said hoarsely. "I was dead inside, just a shell of a person going through the motions. But you brought me back to life. You gave me hope and purpose and love. You gave me everything." They walked back to town hand in hand, both floating with happiness. When they told Samuel the news, he embraced them both, his eyes wet with happy tears. "I am so very glad," he said. "For both of you. You will be good for each other, I know it." The wedding was planned for December, giving them just enough time to make preparations, but not so long that the waiting would be torture. Ophelia spent her days sewing her wedding dress with help from the women of the church, while Cole worked with Mr. Anderson to arrange time off for a brief honeymoon. They planned to travel to San Francisco for a week, a trip that felt wildly extravagant, but that both wanted to mark the beginning of their married life. Cole also surprised Ophelia by purchasing 20 acres of land just outside Hangtown, good land with a creek running through it, and enough flat ground to build a house and maybe run a few head of cattle. He brought her to see it one Sunday afternoon, and she walked the property with wonder in her eyes. "We could build right there," she said, pointing to a gentle rise with a view of the hills, "with a porch facing west so we could watch the sunsets." "Whatever you want," Cole said. "This is our land, Ophelia, our future. We will build it together." The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of activity and anticipation. The whole town seemed excited about the match, even the crusty old miners who rarely showed interest in anything beyond their claims and their whiskey. Mrs. Patterson, who had watched their courtship with the intensity of a hawk watching a rabbit, appointed herself the unofficial coordinator of the wedding preparations, organizing the church women to provide food for the reception and decorations for the ceremony. Cole spent every spare moment with Ophelia, but they were rarely alone. Small-town propriety meant that their meetings were always chaperoned, usually by Samuel, but sometimes by one of the church ladies. They chafed at the restrictions but understood them, and in a way, the anticipation made everything sweeter. 3 days before the wedding, Tom Fairfield arrived in Hangtown with his wife Emily and their 2-year-old daughter Sarah. Cole had not seen his brother in 5 years, and the reunion was emotional and joyful. Tom looked older, more weathered, but happy in a way Cole remembered from before the war. Emily was a cheerful, practical woman who immediately took to Ophelia, and little Sarah was a delight, all bright eyes and infectious giggles. "I cannot believe you are finally settling down," Tom said that evening as the 2 brothers sat on the porch of the hotel where Tom's family was staying. "I had given up hope." "So had I," Cole admitted. "But then I met Ophelia and everything changed. Suddenly I could see a future that was not just more of the same lonely wandering." "She is wonderful," Tom said sincerely, "and it is clear she loves you just as much as you love her." "I am happy for you, Cole, truly." "How are you?" Cole asked. "Really, I mean. The farm, Emily, Sarah, you look good." "I am good," Tom said. "Better than I ever thought I would be after everything we went through. The farm is doing well. Emily is the best thing that ever happened to me. And Sarah, well, she has given me a reason to look forward instead of back. You will understand soon, I think, when you have children of your own." "I hope so," Cole said. "I want that, Tom. A family, a home, all of it. Things I never thought I would want again." "You deserve it," Tom said firmly. "You deserve happiness, Cole. You always did." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with frost on the ground and a brilliant blue sky overhead. Ophelia woke early in the parsonage, her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. The church women arrived to help her dress, and she stood still while they laced her into her wedding gown, a simple but elegant dress of cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. "You are beautiful," Mrs. Patterson said, her usually sharp voice softened with genuine emotion. "Cole Fairfield is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Ophelia said, and meant it. At the church, Cole waited at the altar, trying not to fidget with his borrowed suit. He had shaved carefully that morning, and Tom had helped him tie his necktie, something Cole had not worn since before the war. The church was fuller than it had ever been for a regular service, with seemingly the entire town crammed into the pews to witness the ceremony. When the door at the back of the church opened and Ophelia appeared on her father's arm, Cole forgot to breathe. She looked like something out of a dream, beautiful and radiant in his. Their eyes met across the length of the church, and she smiled at him, that special smile that was just for him, and he felt his heart swell with so much love he thought it might burst. Samuel walked his daughter down the aisle, and when they reached the altar, he placed her hand in Cole's with a blessing and a reminder that they were promising to love each other before God and this community. Then, Samuel stepped back, taking his place as the officiant, and the ceremony began. Cole barely heard the words. He was too focused on Ophelia, on the feeling of her hand in his, on the way she was looking at him like he was the only person in the world. When it came time for the vows, he spoke as clearly and firmly, promising to love and honor and cherish her for all the days of his life. And when she spoke hers, her voice steady and sure, he felt tears prick at his eyes. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "Cole, you may kiss your bride." Cole cupped Ophelia's face in his hands, just as he had that day by the creek, and kissed her softly. The church erupted in applause and cheers, and when they broke apart, both of them were laughing with pure joy. The reception was held in the church hall, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the evening. Cole danced with his new wife, then with Emily, then with little Sarah perched on his hip while she giggled and shrieked with delight. Ophelia danced with her father, with Tom, with half the men in town who wanted to congratulate her and wish her well. As the sun began to set, Cole and Ophelia slipped away from the celebration, walking through the cool evening air to the hotel where they would spend their wedding night before leaving for San Francisco in the morning. They climbed the stairs hand in hand, both suddenly shy now that they were alone. In the room, lit by lamplight and warmed by a fire in the small stove, they came together with tenderness and passion. It was new and a little awkward, as first times often are, but it was also beautiful and right. They learned each other slowly, with patience and laughter and growing confidence. And when they finally lay tangled together in the bed afterward, both breathless and amazed, Ophelia whispered the words that would echo through the rest of their lives. "You brought light to my life," she said again, her voice full of wonder. "I did not know how much darkness I was living in until you showed me what it felt like to really be alive." "We brought light to each other," Cole corrected gently. "You saved me just as much as I saved you, maybe more." "Then we will keep saving each other," Ophelia said. "Every day, for the rest of our lives." They left for San Francisco the next morning on the stagecoach, beginning a week that felt like a wonderful dream. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants, walked along the waterfront watching the ships come and go. They were tourists and newlyweds, drunk on each other and on the adventure of being in a city so much larger and more cosmopolitan than anywhere either of them had been. But as wonderful as San Francisco was, they were both relieved to return to Hangtown, to the life they were building together. Cole moved his few belongings from the bunkhouse at the Anderson Ranch into the parsonage temporarily, sharing the small space with Ophelia and Samuel, while they began the process of building their house on the land Cole had purchased. Construction started in January of 1874, with Cole doing much of the work himself, assisted by Tom before he returned to Missouri and by several men from town who wanted to help. It was slow going in the winter months, but by spring the frame was up, and by summer they had walls and a roof. Ophelia spent her days choosing furniture, sewing curtains, and planning the garden she would plant around their new home. They moved into the house in September, a full year after Cole had first ridden into Hangtown. It was simple but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a sitting room, and that porch facing west that Ophelia had wanted. They spent their first night in their new home lying in bed and listening to the sounds of the night through the open window, holding each other close. "Are you happy?" Cole asked into the darkness. "So happy I am afraid I might be dreaming," Ophelia said. Do you ever regret staying?" "Never," Cole said firmly. "This is what I was searching for all those years, even though I did not know it. A home, a purpose, someone to love who loves me back." "You gave me all of that, Ophelia. You gave me a life worth living." "We gave it to each other," Ophelia said, echoing his words from their wedding night. "And we are going to keep building it together." Life settled into a rhythm that was deeply satisfying in its ordinariness. Cole continued working at the Anderson Ranch, saving money and learning everything he could about running cattle. He talked with Ophelia about eventually buying their own herd, building up their little ranch into something substantial. Ophelia continued her work with the church, teaching Sunday school and visiting the sick, but she also began writing letters to the Territorial Education Office, making inquiries about establishing a proper school in Hangtown. Their first Christmas as a married couple was simple but perfect. They hosted dinner at their new house, with Samuel and a few close friends gathered around their table. They exchanged modest gifts, read from the Bible together, and sang carols in front of the fire. And that night, lying in bed afterward, Ophelia told Cole the news she had been waiting to share. "I am pregnant," she said quietly. "We are going to have a baby." Cole went very still, and for a moment Ophelia worried. But then he pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and she felt his shoulders shaking. He was crying, she realized, but they were tears of joy. "A baby," he whispered. "We are going to have a baby. Ophelia, that is the most wonderful news I have ever heard." "Are you ready?" she asked. "To be a father, I do not know," Cole admitted honestly. "But I want to be. I want to be the kind of father mine was before the war broke him. I want to be present and loving and patient. I want our child to grow up knowing they are loved and valued and safe." "They will," Ophelia assured him, "because we will love them together, raise them together. We will make mistakes, I am sure, but we will do our best, and that will be enough." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into spring. Ophelia bloomed, her face glowing and her belly growing round. Cole treated her like she was made of glass, constantly worried that she was doing too much, lifting too much, walking too far. She tolerated his concern with good humor, knowing it came from love even when it drove her slightly mad. Samuel was delighted at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. He spent hours talking with Ophelia about her mother, sharing stories and memories that helped Ophelia feel connected to the woman who would never meet her grandchild. It was bittersweet but healing, and Ophelia was grateful for the conversations. In late May of 1875, on a warm night with the windows open and the sound of crickets filling the air, Ophelia went into labor. Cole rode into town at breakneck speed to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Henderson, who had delivered half the babies in Hangtown. Samuel came too, pacing the front room while Mrs. Henderson worked with Ophelia in the bedroom, and Cole held his wife's hand and tried not to panic. It was a long labor, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Cole stayed with Ophelia the whole time, wiping her face with a cool cloth, letting her squeeze his hand until he thought the bones might break, whispering encouragement and love. And finally, as the sun rose over the hills and light flooded through the bedroom window, their son was born. He was small and red-faced and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that worked remarkably well. Mrs. Henderson cleaned him up and placed him in Ophelia's arms, and Cole looked down at his wife and his child and felt something fundamental shift inside him. This was his family. His responsibility, his purpose. "He looks like you," Ophelia said, exhausted but radiant. "He looks like himself," Cole said, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. The little fist closed around his finger with surprising strength, and Cole felt his eyes fill with tears again. "He is perfect. What should we name him?" Ophelia asked. They had discussed names, of course, but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Cole knew. "Samuel," he said. "After your father, if that is all right with you. Samuel Thomas Fairfield for both our fathers." "Samuel Thomas," Ophelia repeated, smiling. "That is perfect." Samuel Owens cried when he heard his grandson's name, holding the baby with reverent care and blessing him with prayers and tears. And Cole, watching his father-in-law cradle his son, felt the last of his old wounds finally begin to heal. He was not just a survivor anymore, not just a wanderer who had found a place to rest. He was a husband, a father, a member of a community. He was home. The years that followed were full and rich. Little Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved animals and the outdoors. When he was 2, Ophelia gave birth to twin girls, Grace and Hope, who were as different as night and day. Grace was serious and thoughtful, while Hope was mischievous and fearless. The little house that had seemed so spacious suddenly felt small, and Cole began planning an addition. He had also, with Mr. Anderson's help and blessing, managed to buy a small herd of cattle and was building up his own ranching operation on their land. It was hard work, and money was tight, but they were managing. Ophelia had also succeeded in her campaign for a school, and a young teacher from Sacramento had been hired to teach Hangtown's children. Ophelia assisted her, teaching the younger students and organizing fundraisers to buy books and supplies. Their life was not without challenges. There were hard winters when they worried about the cattle surviving, dry summers when the creek ran low and they had to haul water from town. There were illnesses, injuries, disappointments, but through it all, they had each other. Every night, no matter how tired or worried or frustrated they were, they came together in their bed and held each other close, remembering that they were partners in everything. When Samuel Owens fell ill in the winter of 1881, it was a blow to the entire family. He had been healthy and active well into his 60s, but a lung infection took hold that winter and would not let go. Ophelia and Cole took him into their home, which by then had been expanded to include 4 bedrooms and a larger sitting room. They nursed him as best they could, but they all knew he was fading on a cold February night, with his daughter holding one hand and his son-in-law holding the other. Samuel Owens died peacefully in his sleep. The funeral was the largest Hangtown had ever seen, with people coming from miles around to pay their respects to the preacher who had served the community faithfully for 16 years. In his will, Samuel left everything to Ophelia, including a letter that he had written shortly before he died. She read it alone in the bedroom, tears streaming down her face, while Cole stayed with the children in the other room. "My dearest Ophelia," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I have gone on to be with your mother at last, and I confess I am ready. I have lived a good life, rich in love and purpose, and I have no regrets. But my greatest joy, the thing I am most proud of, is you. You have grown into a woman of strength, wisdom, and deep compassion. You have built a beautiful life with Cole, raised wonderful children, and been a light to everyone around you. I am so very proud to be your father, and I am grateful to Cole for being the man I always hoped you would find. He loves you well, as you deserve to be loved. Take care of each other, my dear. Remember that love is the only thing that truly lasts. Your loving father, Samuel." Cole found her an hour later, still sitting on the bed with the letter in her lap. He sat beside her and pulled her into his arms, and she cried against his shoulder until she had no tears left. "He was so proud of you," Cole said when she finally quieted. "He told me once that watching you flourish in our marriage was the greatest gift he could have asked for." "I wish our children could have known him longer," Ophelia said. "He was such a good grandfather." "They will remember him," Cole assured her. "And we will make sure they know what kind of man he was. We will tell them stories, teach them his values. He will live on through them." Ophelia nodded, then looked up at her husband. "Cole, I need you to know something. I could not have survived losing him without you. You have been my rock, my partner, my love. You have given me so much." "You have given me just as much," Cole said. "More, even. You saved my life, Ophelia. Before I met you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live, a reason to hope. You brought light to my life." "And you brought light to mine," Ophelia whispered, resting her head against his chest. "We saved each other." The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. Young Samuel grew into a fine young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. The twins, Grace and Hope, were as close as sisters could be despite their different temperaments. 2 more children came along, another boy named Peter and a girl named Ruth, rounding out the family to 5 children in all. The ranch grew and prospered. Cole hired hands to help with the work, and eventually young Samuel became a full partner in the operation. They bought more land, built a bigger barn, increased the size of their herd. The house was expanded again, becoming a sprawling, comfortable home that was always full of noise and life and love. Ophelia never stopped her community work. She served on the school board, organized aid for families in need, and took over many of her father's pastoral duties in the years after his death. A new preacher eventually came to Hangtown, but everyone still looked to Ophelia for guidance and support. She had inherited her father's gift for seeing the best in people and helping them find their way. One evening in 1895, 22 years after Cole had first ridden into Hangtown, he and Ophelia sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had dreamed of doing all those years ago. The children were grown now, Samuel already married with a child of his own, the twins courting young men from neighboring ranches, Peter and Ruth still at home but growing more independent every day. "You remember the day we met?" Cole asked, taking Ophelia's hand in his. They were both in their late 40s now, with gray threading through their hair and lines on their faces earned through years of laughter and hard work. "Of course I do," Ophelia said. "You were standing in the street with your hands raised, being accused of horse theft, and you were so calm about it." "I was not calm inside," Cole admitted. "I was thinking that this was exactly the kind of trouble I should have expected in a town with a name like Hangtown." Ophelia laughed. "But you stayed anyway." "Why, you know why," Cole said. "Because of you. Because I looked at you and something inside me just knew this is it. This is what I have been searching for." "I felt it too," Ophelia confessed. "It scared me half to death. I thought you would break my heart when you left." "But I did not leave," Cole said. "No," Ophelia agreed. "You stayed. You built a life here. You became part of this community, part of this family. You became my husband, the father of my children, my partner in everything. You kept your promise, Cole. You proved that you were serious about staying." "It was not hard," Cole said. "Staying with you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of dinner being prepared, Peter and Ruth arguing good-naturedly about something, the everyday sounds of a home filled with life. "Cole," Ophelia said eventually, "do you ever regret it, the way your life turned out? You could have gone to Sacramento, worked on the railroad, maybe ended up somewhere bigger and more exciting than Hangtown." "Never," Cole said firmly. "Not for one single moment. This life, this place, this family, you are everything I ever wanted and more than I ever thought I could have. You brought light to my life, Ophelia. You made me whole again." "You did the same for me," Ophelia said softly. "I was half a person before I met you, going through the motions of living but not really alive. You woke me up. You made me feel things I had never felt before. You gave me passion and purpose and joy." "We gave those things to each other," Cole said, pulling her close. "And we will keep giving them to each other for whatever time we have left." "However much time that is," Ophelia said, "it will not be enough. I could have 1,000 years with you and it still would not be enough." They kissed then, with all the tenderness and passion of their years together, and the sun sank below the hills, painting the sky in colors too beautiful for words. The following years were good ones. Samuel and his wife gave them 3 more grandchildren, and the twins both married and started families of their own. Peter went east to study at a university, much to everyone's surprise, and came back with ideas about modern ranching techniques that Cole and Samuel implemented with great success. Ruth, The youngest and perhaps the most like her mother became a teacher, taking over the Hangtown school when the previous teacher retired. Cole and Ophelia grew older together with grace and gratitude. They had their share of aches and pains, the inevitable wear of bodies well used. But they remained active and engaged, helping with the grandchildren, managing the ranch, participating in community life. They took walks together every evening when the weather allowed, and they never stopped talking, never ran out of things to say to each other. In the summer of 1905, on the eve of their 31st wedding anniversary, Cole woke in the night with a pain in his chest. He did not want to wake Ophelia, did not want to worry her, but she had always been attuned to him and she woke anyway. "Cole," she said, sitting up immediately. "What is wrong?" "Just a pain," he said, trying to make light of it. "Probably something I ate." But Ophelia knew better. She sent Peter, who was visiting with his family, riding for the doctor at breakneck speed. The doctor came and examined Cole and pronounced that his heart was strained, that he needed to rest and avoid excitement and take things easy. Cole did his best to follow the doctor's orders, but it was hard for a man who had been active his whole life to suddenly be sedentary. He chafed at the restrictions, but Ophelia was firm, enlisting the children and grandchildren to make sure he did not overdo it. For 2 years, he managed reasonably well. He had good days and bad days, but he was still Cole, still the man she loved. And then, on a cold morning in January of 1908, he did not wake up. His heart, the doctor said, had simply given out. He had died peacefully in his sleep, with Ophelia beside him. The funeral was second only to Samuel Owens in size and solemnity. Cole Fairfield had become a respected member of the community, known for his fairness, his hard work, and his devotion to his family. People came from all over to pay their respects, and every one of them had a story about how Cole had helped them or inspired them or simply been a good neighbor. Ophelia stood beside the grave, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and felt the weight of her loss threatening to crush her. But even in her grief, she felt gratitude. She had had 33 years with Cole Fairfield, 33 years of love and partnership and joy. Not everyone got that. Not everyone got to build a life with someone who truly saw them and valued them and loved them unconditionally. That night, alone in the big house that felt empty without him, she found a letter tucked into his desk drawer. It was addressed to her in his familiar handwriting, and she opened it with trembling fingers. "My dearest Ophelia," it began. "If you are reading this, then I have left you behind, and for that I am deeply sorry. I know how hard it will be for you, because I know how hard it would be for me if our positions were reversed. But I need you to know something, and I am writing this now while I am still clear-headed and able to put my thoughts in order. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Meeting you changed the entire course of my life. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up grateful every morning. You brought light to my life when I was living in darkness. You saved me, Ophelia, in every way a person can be saved. And I hope in my own small way that I did the same for you. I hope I gave you as much as you gave me. I hope I loved you well enough to make up for leaving too soon. Please do not grieve for too long, my love. Live for both of us now. Enjoy our children and grandchildren, see the ranch prosper. Continue your good work in the community. And know that wherever I am waiting for you, and when your time comes, I will be there to welcome you home. All my love forever and always, Cole." Ophelia clutched the letter to her chest and wept, but they were not only tears of sorrow. They were also tears of gratitude, of love, of remembrance. Cole had given her everything, and she had given him everything in return. Their love story had been simple in some ways, the classic tale of two lonely people finding each other and building a life together. But it had also been extraordinary, filled with moments of grace and beauty and profound connection. She lived another 12 years after Cole's death, years filled with her children and grandchildren, and the continued work she found so meaningful. She never remarried. Some widows did, but Ophelia could not imagine loving anyone the way she had loved Cole. He had been her partner, her soulmate, the other half of her heart. On a warm afternoon in June of 1920, at the age of 69, Ophelia Fairfield passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her children found her in the morning, lying in the bed she had shared with Cole for so many years, a smile on her face as if she had seen something wonderful just before the end. They buried her next to Cole in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Hangtown. The whole town turned out for the funeral, 3 generations of people whose lives she had touched. And at the graveside, young Samuel Fairfield, now himself a grandfather, spoke about his mother and father and the love they had shared. "My parents taught us that love was not just a feeling but a choice," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "A choice you made every day in big ways and small. They chose each other every single day of their marriage, and in doing so they showed us what it meant to build a life with another person. They saved each other, gave light to each other, and loved each other with a depth and constancy that inspired everyone who knew them. And now they are together again, as they always should be." On their shared gravestone, the family had carved a simple inscription beneath their names and dates. They brought light to each other's lives, and in loving each other, they illuminated the world around them. The ranch continued to prosper under Samuel's management, and then his sons, passing down through the generations. The house that Cole and Ophelia had built was expanded and modernized but never abandoned, remaining the heart of the family's holdings. And every Fairfield child grew up hearing the story of how their great-great-grandfather, a wandering cowboy with a troubled past, had ridden into Hangtown one hot August day in 1873 and met the preacher's daughter who would change his life forever. It was a love story for the ages, they all agreed. Simple and profound, difficult and beautiful, exactly the kind of story that reminded people what was truly important in life. Love, family, commitment, partnership. The things that lasted long after gold mines were played out and boom towns faded. The things that really mattered. And somewhere beyond the veil, in whatever place souls go to rest, Cole and Ophelia Fairfield were together again, holding hands and watching sunsets, their love as strong and true as it had ever been. Because some bonds are not broken by death. Some loves are truly eternal. And theirs was one of them,